Yet things may have gone far otherwise and far worse. When you think of the great battle of Pelennor, do not forget the battles in Dale and the valor of Durin's folk. Think of what might have been. Dragonfire and savage swords in Eriador, night in Rivendell. There might be no queen in Gondor. We might now hope to return from the victory here, only to ruin and ash. But that has been averted.
Hey there, Tolkieneers. I'm Danny J.
And I'm Joel N., and welcome back to Keep on Tolkien.
Yeah, episode 53. Damn, a lot of episodes.
Yeah, we're going.
We're going. So today, we've been talking about doing this episode for a while, and I'm excited.
Yeah, we've kind of fantasized about it for a while.
And honestly, we think this might be like a new series now, because
we realized we could definitely do more than one.
Yeah, definitely do more than one of these. So today, we're talking about lesser-known battles. Yeah.
Yeah, because, God, there are so many battles in Tolkien.
Right.
Yeah, so, when we're talking about lesser-known battles, we just mean that we want to touch on some of the ones that we think haven't really gotten the attention they deserve.
Their fair shake.
Right, because The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion are filled with so many awesome battles.
Yeah, they just offhandedly mention battles all the time.
Yeah, some of them just kind of fall by the wayside. So we thought we'd kind of have an episode touching on some of those battles that might not get the attention they need.
Yeah.
But before we jumped into some of these lesser-known battles, we thought it'd just be a good time to maybe touch on the subject of why there are so many goddamn battles in Tolkien. Like, there's actually so many that we have to have an episode about the fact we can't talk about them all.
Talk about them all. And that's the thing we were just talking about while we were just warming up here. Like, we can't really think of any other fantasy with the exception of few high fantasy things that have this much war in them.
Yeah, and a lot of them are usually inspired by
Right, yeah,
Tolkien.
They've come after their...
We're looking at you, J.R.R. Martin.
Yeah, I don't want to say derivative, but,
Yeah, I mean, but as we all know, The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion are known for their stunning and well-written battles. They're super tantalizing to read, and they're almost always backed up with some kind of crazy, legit history.
Yeah, that's another thing we were talking about, too, is like they have history leading up to, the political history leading up to the battle, and then the implications of what happens afterwards are pretty realistic when it comes to, that type of warfare / conquest.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
As many of us might know, J.R.R. Tolkien was a lieutenant during the First World War, and he fought in the Battle of the Somme, which really sucked if you've never heard of it.
Yeah, World War I is basically known as one of the most traumatizing wars in history, largely due to the use of trench warfare.
Yeah, it was really the war when technology got ahead of us.
Yeah, it got ahead of us before we put kind of a moral code on it. That's when we were using gases and all sorts of crazy, horrible things.
Machine guns and mortars, all kinds of fun stuff. So Rachel Camberry, who's a writer and editor specializing in war and military literature and history, she writes in an article called The War Without Allegory, World War I, Tolkien, and The Lord of the Rings. She says, quote, "The Lord of the Rings is a complex investigation of war and trauma, nature and industrialization, comradeship and loss."
Yeah, that just kind of really puts it so perfect. Like, hits the nail on the head.
Describe The Lord of the Rings in one sentence.
Yeah, she goes on in her article to talk about how The Lord of the Rings is basically a war story, and it heavily reflects the writing style of Old English warrior poetry like Beowulf or The Wanderer.
Yeah, dude, Beowulf is so great.
You can definitely feel that in especially some of his earlier writings.
Oh, yeah. Did you read Beowulf? I think we read it in school, right?
Yeah, we definitely went through that. That was fun.
Yeah, I love Beowulf. Tolkien was also steeped in the same putrid conditions, the petri dish, if you will, that gave us some of the great famous novels of World War I, All Quiet on the Western Front being one of my favorite books ever.
Yeah, we've talked about that a few times.
Yeah, Parade's End, and also a Farewell to Arms, just to name a few. And a lot of pretty much all my favorite poetry ever comes from World War I as well.
Yeah, and these novels are all very dark, very gritty.
Yeah, very hopeless.
Very hopeless, very realistic. And so, yeah, they really reflect the experiences of their authors, and Tolkien was right in there with these guys.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, as you and I talk about all the time, some of his stories really reflect that darkness.
Oh, yeah.
So during World War II, Second Lieutenant John Ronald Reuel Tolkien was a battalion signaling officer to the 11th I'm going to pronounce this right, Lancashire
I think it's
Fusiliers.
It's Lancashire Fusiliers, I think.
I think you're right. Thank you for that.
There's British people listening that are just like, God, these
Shake
guys,
it.
it's
These
fucking terrible.
American assholes. Yeah, so at his post, seeking relief from, boredom, chaos, complete brutality, all of the distractions of the war, Tolkien would write on scraps of paper. He'd write in grimy canteens, at lectures on cold, foggy mornings. He'd write in huts full of smut and horrible things going on. And he'd write by candlelight and bell tents, and even some down in the dugouts and in the trenches under shell fire. So it just became what he'd basically do to distract himself.
Just to escape, yeah. It's funny that you talk about how you write on scraps of paper, because I don't know if we mentioned this on another episode or not, but like there's that legendary story where he found a piece of paper and wrote, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit."
Yeah.
Which was just like a habit that he had from the war, because like paper was so hard to find that like when you found a blank piece of paper, you were like, "Oh boy," as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was because he wrote that. The Hobbit was during the Second World War, right, when the paper drives were going on.
He wrote that actually while he was a professor correcting papers.
Yeah, but it was during one of the paper drives. Yeah,
It very well could have been. Yeah, so he's writing these stories basically during the war and all these terrible conditions. And at first his stories were, quote-unquote fairy tales or fairy stories, little vignettes concerning gnomes and sprites and elf-like creatures, and, just the kinds of stories that Tolkien had been in love with since he was a kid, since he learned how to read.
Yeah, but it wasn't until later on, really, that his work kind of took a darker tone. And when he was sent back to England with trench fever during the Battle of the Somme, two Tolkien's closest friends were killed. And that's when Tolkien wrote out the haunting epic of The Fall of Gondolin.
Yeah, that was really the beginning, I feel like. And so, naturally, like we said, all of these dark experiences really reflected in his writing, and we think that has a lot to do with why there are so many battles, and also just why the battles are so great and realistic.
Yeah.
And so we thought we'd just kind of end off this first section here with a quote from Simon Tolkien, who's J.R.R.'s grandson.
I went back to The Lord of the Rings and realized how much of his grand conception had been informed by the horrors of the trenches. Evil in Middle-earth is above all industrialized. Sauron's orcs are brutalized workers. Saruman has a mind of metal and wheels. And the desolate moonscapes of Mordor and Isengard are eerily reminiscent of the No Man's Land of 1916.
Yeah, after reading that, I had never really considered that, how so many of the scenes that you think of in Lord of the Rings are totally reminiscent of old No Man's Land and trench warfare.
Or the Anfauglith.
Yeah,
in the first age, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must have just been like a wasteland.
The gasping dust.
Yeah, so like we mentioned, his Tolkien's experiences really changed him, and this is reflected in his tales.
So that got a little heavy, but that's the implication of what we're talking about here, guys. But
right, that being said,
that had to be said. Let's start with our first battle. And this is one of our favorites, and we talk about it a decent amount on here. And that is what, Joel?
We're going to talk about the Battle of Dale.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what the opening excerpt was talking about. So I'm sure a lot of folks, when you think of the Battle of Dale, you'll probably think of The Hobbit, like when Smaug attacked Dale stuff.
The fall of Dale.
Yeah, that's not what we're talking about.
No. This is later on in that magic year of Third Age, 3019, which everything happens in The Lord of the Rings.
It's like balls deep War of the Ring stuff.
Yeah, and this is March 15th of that year.
Yeah, and March 15th is a pretty infamous date because it's either the 15th and or the 16th is when three major battles happen.
Mm-hmm.
Most well known as the Battle of Pelennor Fields.
Horror show.
Yeah, an absolute horror show. But not many people realize that at the same time as that battle, there were actually two other battles going on at the same time. One of them was up in Dale, and that's what we're talking about first. And then there was also one that happened in Mirkwood, which we're going to talk about next. So get ready.
Yeah, because if you think about it, it makes sense because, the assault on Gondor is assault from the southeast, right?
Right. It's supposed to be like an all-out war against men. Why is it so concentrated right there?
Yeah, you'd have people, because the northeast is hostile territory as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that Rovanian region is really at risk of Easterling invasion.
Right. So, on March 15th, in the year 3019 of the Third Age. This is when Sauron moves an army towards the city of Dale. So the dwarves of Erebor and the men of Dale had basically refused to acknowledge the overlordship and alliance of Sauron. He had offered that to them earlier, and they basically said, fuck you.
Right, which they talk about at the Council of Elrond, right?
Yep, they talk about that at the Council of Elrond, yeah. So the current leaders right now are Dane II Ironfoot. He's king of the dwarves of Erebor, and King Brand is king of the men of Dale. Brand is actually the son of Bard the Bowman.
Bard the Bowman's son, yeah. While Sauron's larger southern armies invaded Gondor, a host of Easterlings advanced in the north to prevent the armies of his enemies joining together.
Yeah, because, I mean, they could have used the help down at Pelennor.
Oh, yeah. and that's kind of, it's like, you kind of think, like, why didn't anybody from...
Yeah, why didn't anybody else show up? I mean, there's a ton of people, like, even people came from Dol Amroth and shit. Like.
Oh, yeah, because Gondor was emptied. They talk about that in the book. But yeah, nobody from the Northmen don't show up, which is this is why they're busy.
Yeah, they're busy. And so on the 17th is when Sauron's army finally makes it to the city of Dale, and they begin attacking the city of Dale.
Sauron's forces were probably more numerous, but the armies of the men of Dale and Erebor, they had the advantage that they had superior dwarf-make weaponry.
Yeah, Dale and Erebor had been living pretty well together for the past, probably couple decades at least.
Oh, yeah.
So, they've had time to make that nice dwarven fucking armor and shit.
Yeah, because by this time, King Brand and Dane are like...
Yeah, they're buds.
Very good friends, yeah.
Yeah, they're working together. Yeah, so after 3 days of heavy close quarters fighting, Kings Brand and Dane were forced to retreat into the Lonely Mountains, so they had to give up Dale.
And that's some shit there.
Yeah, and this is one of the first times also that one of the kings under the mountain has allowed like refugees of men into the
kingdom,
yeah.
A few sturdy warriors led by Brand and Dane, they fought bravely defending the gate of Erebor, which was not taken.
Yeah, the gate remained closed, and right up front, both of the kings. And King Dane was killed as he stood defending the body of his already dead ally, King Brand. And the defenders of the mountains were now under siege. So both the kings died, and Dane was defending the body of Brand, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. But after the forces of Gondor and Rohan defeated the main power of Sauron in the Battle of Pelennor Fields on March 25th, the Easterlings began to lose heart. Yeah,
seeing that the morale of their foes was wavering, the army of Dale and Erebor under the new kings, Bard II and Thorin III Stonehelm, they managed to lift the siege on Erebor on that same day, and they drove the Easterlings completely out of Dale.
Dude, I imagine, like, as far as these kind of old battles take place, the breaking of a siege must have been
crazy.
The wildest event. Because, like, you're sitting there for how long? Months,
could be
years.
Like, yeah.
And all of a sudden, just like, just vomits out, like, oh, shit, they're breaking the siege.
Oh, it's happening now. All about surprise.
Surprise, bitch.
Yeah, so the sons of Dane and Brand, who are Brand II and Thorin III, they break the siege. And that more or less brings an end to the Battle of Dale. But this battle was incredibly important in the course of the War of the Ring.
Oh yeah, instrumental. If Sauron's Easterling armies had beaten the dwarves and the men of Dale, they would have been able to join up with Sauron's forces from Dol Guldur, which had been busy over in Mirkwood.
Yeah, they had actively been attacking
Lothlorien as well.
Mirkwood and Lothlorien.
And Lothlorien, yeah. But if it would have been a hammer anvil situation.
Right.
Wouldn't have been good.
Yeah, this also would have enabled Mordor's armies to flank Gondor and Rohan from the north and from the rear. So it could have been bad on many fronts.
Gandalf himself actually commented that if the Battle of Dale had been lost, the forces of the West would have been crushed, regardless of the victory at the Battle of Pelennor Fields.
Right, yeah. So this was, that's why I wanted to start lesser known battles for this one, because this one was so important.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of end talking about the Battle of Dale with a nice excerpt here about it. I grieved at the fall of Thorin, said Gandalf, and now we hear that Dane has fallen, fighting in Dale again, even while we fought here. I should call that a heavy loss, if it was not a wonder rather that in his great age he could still wield his axe as mightily as they say that he did, standing over the body of King Brand before the gate of Erebor until the darkness fell. Yet things might have gone far otherwise and far worse. When you think of the great battle of Pelennor, do not forget the battles in Dale and the valor of Durin's folk. Think of what might have been, dragonfire and savage swords in Eriador. Night in Rivendell. There might be no queen in Gondor. We might now hope to return from the victory here only to ruin and ash. But that has been averted because I met Thorin Oakenshield one evening on the edge of spring in Bree. A chance meeting, as we say in Middle-earth.
That all did kind of fall together, didn't it?
Yeah, had it not been for the quest of Erebor, they wouldn't have had an established kingdom out in Dale and Erebor. It would have been a dragon.
Yeah.
The dragon would have joined Sauron.
Instead. Oh, man, that would have been terrible.
Yeah, that's why he says dragon fire and savage swords and things. Cause,
damn, that sucks.
Right, it could have been way worse. Yeah, when you look at some of these other battles, you think back to Pelennor Fields, you're like, man, like you thought they were narrowly holding it together. It was even more.
They had the ideal circumstance.
Yeah, it was even more
battle,
narrow of a win than you realize.
Yeah.
So with that, we think it's a good time to jump into the Battle of Mirkwood because this was also going on at the same time.
Yeah. This is also known as the Battle Under the Trees. So let's go back to March 15th, TA 3019. The realm of Thranduil was invaded by the orcs of Dol Guldur. Fuckers. However, the majority of these forces were sent to Lothlorien. Yeah,
so the main host went to Lothlorien, and the remaining forces were supposed to attack the Woodland Realm with the help of some Easterlings.
But those Easterlings were fucking busy.
That's right. Those Easterlings never came. You know why? Because they were fucking stuck back in Dale.
Trying to get some stubborn-ass dwarves out of a mountain.
Yeah, they got stuck over there with the dwarves and men of Dale, so they never got their backup.
Haha.
So that being the case, Thranduil himself led an assault on these lesser forces, and there was a long battle from which came, quote-unquote, great ruin and fire among the woods of Greenwood the Great.
Which this is kind of one of those things too, like because I always wondered when I was a kid, when I'd first read the Lord of the Rings / had seen the movies, why none of the other free people were getting involved.
Right, because we had spent the first
end of Third Age clash.
First like whole movie or two meeting all these people.
Yeah, but they totally it almost seemed like the elves and dwarves just left these guys to fend for themselves.
Right, yeah.
No, they were actively fighting. You got elves fighting in Mirkwood and Lothlorien, and you've got dwarves and men of the north fighting in Dale all at the same time, which to me is insane. You wouldn't show that in the movie
because that's so important. Because in the movie they drive home that Sauron's point was to destroy men, right?
Yeah. Well, and then talk about 2 bonus battles that you can just cut to on the same fucking
just
day.
Showing how much he is really trying to destroy men. But maybe it would have been too much for an audience to focus on.
It was only a $94 million budget,
Yeah, but being that this is a lesser-known battle, you might not hear much about it, but there are actually a couple of references to this happening during the Return of the King.
But everywhere Frodo looked, he saw the signs of war. Under the boughs of Mirkwood, there was a deadly strife of elves, men, and fell beasts.
Yeah, so that was a quick excerpt from the Breaking of the Fellowship, from the Fellowship of the Ring. We got another excerpt here. Now, why did not we wish for some of our own kinsfolk, Legolas? Legolas stood before the gate and turned his bright eyes away north and east, and his far face was troubled. I do not think that any would come, he answered. They have no need to ride to war. War already marches on their own lands.
He's essentially saying, they're going to get it too. Don't worry. Don't wait.
Yeah, it's almost like a little hint, like he's used his far sight to see that something is up back home.
Yeah.
Yeah, but ultimately, after a long battle under the trees, the orcs were defeated on both fronts on the same day, which is pretty badass. So we'll kind of end the Battle of Mirkwood off with a cool excerpt here.
In the north, also, there had been war and evil. The realm of Thranduil was invaded, and there was long battle under the trees, and a great ruin of fire. But in the end, Thranduil had won the victory. And on the day of the new year of the elves, Celeborn and Thranduil met in the midst of the forest, and they renamed Mirkwood Ern Lascalin, the Wood of Green Leaves. Thranduil took all the northern regions as far as the mountains that rise in the forest for his realm, and Celeborn took the southern wood below the narrows and named it East Lorien. All the wide forest between was given to the Beornings and the woodmen. But after the passing of Galadriel in a few years, Celeborn grew weary of this realm, and went to Imladris to dwell with the sons of Elrond. In the greenwood the Sylvan Elves remained untroubled, but in Lorien there lingered sadly only a few of its former people, and there was no longer light or song in Caras Galadron.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. There's a lot of information in that excerpt that I did not know.
Yeah, same here.
So this battle was ultimately very important because afterwards I guess they split up their realms. It changed.
They redo the borders of their kingdoms and stuff.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Another very important, lesser-known battle. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and the next couple battles we're going to talk about are actually dwarven-related battles. So, I was very excited to include these.
Oh, yeah, we had to. Don't worry, there's some Dunedain stuff later. It's just like, I wonder how skewed our podcast is because I like the Dunedain and you like the dwarves. Like
Everyone's like, where are the elves?
Yeah, can we talk about the elves today, guys?
So the first battle that we're going to talk about in relation to dwarves, it's not so much a specific battle as it is an overall war, and it's probably one of the most badass wars you never knew about.
Yeah. And this is called the War of the Dwarves and Dragons.
Yeah, what other race has had a straight-out war...
Straight-out beef with the dragons.
With dragons, and been able to fight them?
Yeah.
The dwarves.
So this was a conflict between Durin's folk and the Dragons of the Grey Mountains in 3rd Age 2570 to around 3rd Age 2589.
Yeah, so following the defeat of Morgoth in the War of Wrath, that's the end of the First Age, there were still some dragons left in Middle-earth. Most of them got killed out in the war, but there were some. There was one online source we found that said that there were only specifically 2 dragons that survived.
And that would have had to have been Smaug and Scatha, right?
No, those 2 came further down the line.
Oh.
Because...
then the initial War of Wrath, it's saying.
Yeah, right after the War of Wrath, all the dragons were killed off, except for possibly 2, but very few. But these dragons basically hightailed it out of there, and they ended up residing in the Fjordwaith, which is the northern wastes. So far north, there's nothing up there. And so ever since then, for about 6,000 years, these dragons just hung out up there, multiplied, and became strong. So they went from very few to like an entire new brood of dragons.
The Fjordwaith is known as the land of dragon sex. Where it's like, if you hear on the winds, you can hear the dragons mating.
God, what does that sound like? So after 6,000 years of mating, in the year 2570 of the Third Age, the dragons made war upon the dwarves of the Grey Mountains, sacking and plundering all of their halls.
The dwarves held out for around 20 years, but finally, in 2589 of the Third Age, the dragons attacked the halls of King Dain I.
Yes, King Dain had acquired so much treasure, it actually got around. The word got out to the dragons.
Word got out.
Yeah, apparently the Grey Mountains were supposed to be particularly rich with treasures and such. So.
Yeah, because they weren't, I was just reading recently, because they were relatively unmined and stuff at that during that era. Yeah,
so
untouched.
Dwarves come, get all this treasure. Dragons are like, that's mine. So King Dain and his second son, Fror, are ultimately killed outside the doors of their keep by a cold drake. And there's a lot of speculation about what the term cold drake means.
Yeah. Cold Drake, is that in reference to Canadian rapper Drake? Because he's from Canada. It's cold up there.
He's cold. Yeah, some people think, it's just because it was a dragon that lived in the cold, and then some people are like, no, maybe it had, ice breath, a cold drake. What's the difference between that and a regular drake? We don't really know, but they exist, and they are something.
Yeah, we don't really know. I mean, the last real lore we had on this subject was probably the show Drake and Josh, right?
I actually never watched Drake and Josh.
It's a fun show.
Don't judge me.
I thought it was funny.
Yeah, so now the king of the dwarves in the Grey Mountains has died. So has his second son. So following the death of their king, most of Durin's folk abandoned the Grey Mountains completely and gave it to the dragons. And that's how the dragons got some of their gold, because there's some famous dragon hordes in the future. Like, I think someone in the Aeth had Scatha.
Scatha the Worm.
Yeah, Scatha the Worm. I'm pretty sure Scatha's hoard of gold comes from this.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so after all of this goes on and the war with the dragons is over, Gandalf describes the Grey Mountains as, quote, simply stiff with goblins, hobgoblins, and orcs of the worst description. So it's just a pretty shitty place now.
Yeah, which is weird because they go through like the foot of the Grey Mountains on their way back after The Hobbit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they go around.
Oh, they go north around.
Yeah, and then they say that there's like they had adventures, and we're not going to talk about them here. I was like, what the fuck?
Oh, man. I won't. Well, yeah. You'd probably have some adventures if you went around this place. It sounds like a pretty crazy place to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so after the war, the dwarves of Middle-earth managed to live in peace for a couple of centuries. That is until the coming of Smaug the Golden in the year 2770. So, I mean, even though the war with the dragons is over, I mean, there's still these ongoing conflicts with the dragons coming down to steal the dwarves' gold.
Still beef there.
Yeah, because, I mean, Smaug heard about the wealth of Erebor, and he flies down, quote-unquote, like a hurricane, sacks that shit, and then he lives there until the quest for Erebor comes around.
We should do as our next parody song. Have you heard the song "The Hurricane" by Bob Dylan?
Yes.
Yeah, we should do that. Just about Smaug.
About Smaug. Yeah, the dwarves, man, they have more history with dragons than I think anyone else, and that might be one of the reasons why I like them so much.
Why? Because you're a capitalist pig? Is that why?
Because I like dragons?
No, I thought you said you like them because they they have a bunch of treasure. I thought that's what you said.
No, because they have a lot of history with dragons.
Okay.
I like them because they have a lot of treasure.
I like all the characters that have the most money.
I really like the dragons because they just have all the treasure,
You know who's really awesome? Jeff Bezos. That guy is he has so much money. God, he's awesome.
You know who's my favorite Lord of the Rings character? Probably Scatha the Dragon because he's so fucking rich. He's so cool.
He's rich as hell. We read that article that one time that an economist wrote that put the treasure of Smaug in the $50 billion range or something like that. Yeah, just a stupid amount of wealth.
Taking into account inflation. Yeah. It was supposed to be outrageous. I mean, especially considering the Arkenstone was in the Erebor batch.
Yeah, we'll have to find that article and post it when we post this episode. I can't remember. It's a stupid amount of money.
It's a hilarious amount.
It's
of
a
money.
country's GDP of money. Yeah.
So to end off the subject of the War of Dwarves and Dragons, we've got a excerpt here for you. But Thorin I took the Arkenstone and went into the far north to the Grey Mountains, where most of Durin's folk were now gathering, for those mountains were rich and little explored. But there were dragons in the waste beyond, and after many years they became strong again and multiplied, and they made war on the dwarves and plundered their works. At last Dane I, together with Fror his son, were slain at the doors of his hall by a great cold drake. The dwarves hid themselves in deep places, guarding their hoards, but when evil began to stir and the dragons reappeared, one by one their ancient treasures were all plundered, and they became a wandering people.
Yep, that's what happens. You lose all your money, man.
Yeah, so it is true. After the War of the Dwarves and the Dragons is pretty much when all of the dwarven colonies become a wandering folk, at least in the part of Middle-earth that we're familiar with.
And let's get on to some more dwarf shit, man. This is a battle that I can never pronounce.
Yeah, so the next dwarf battle we're going to talk about is the Battle of Azanulbazar.
Yeah.
And this one is actually really cool because there is a lot of information about it.
Yeah, they show this in the Hobbit film.
They do, and that's one of the scenes that I don't mind watching because it is pretty badass.
It's cool. It's a cool-ass scene.
That's closer to what I would have imagined dwarven fighting to be like. More, not like what the main characters do in the movie.
Yeah. And then that high frame rate, it looks
really good, yeah.
Real good.
So the Battle of Azanulbazar. So the Battle of Azanulbazar takes place during a different war that the dwarves have. And this is the War of the Dwarves and Orcs. And this begins in the year 2790 of the Third Age.
So this happens when Thror, who had been the king of the Lonely Mountain, attempted to reclaim Moria, but was slain by orcs, and his body was mutilated by Azog the Defiler.
Yeah, so keep in mind, Moria at this point in time is emptied because of the Balrog, and so there's like a bunch of orcs and shit living in there.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted it back.
Then, as an insult, Azog actually offers a small bag of money for their losses. This is that like a sarcastic weregild kind of thing that he does.
Exactly. Yeah. He's like, here's a little something for your loss.
Yeah.
Not worth much. Yeah, so this obviously infuriated the dwarves and rallied them to war. And when we say the dwarves, we're not just talking Durin's folk. From the year 2790 to 2793, the Longbeards gathered an army calling on all other 6 houses of the dwarves for all-out war. Because, I mean, all 7 houses of the dwarves hate orcs.
Yeah, this is now a blood feud.
But yeah, now that one of the orcs has killed one of the leaders of their houses, they're like, all right.
They're
Yeah.
not having it anymore.
So in the year 2793, the dwarven host departed for war.
Little is actually known about the 6-year-long war, but it is known that most of it was fought in the great mines and tunnels of the Misty Mountains, where the dwarves excelled in combat.
Yeah, they love that underground shit.
I just think of like the movie The Descent when I think of like dwarf combat, like barely lit, fucking struggling, screeching, stabbing, scratching.
They got that. They got that dark sight perk, you know.
Yeah. It was when we were playing Pathfinder the other day. Joel's the character's
Dark
like,
vision
I'm a
or something?
dwarf. I can see in the dark. We're all half elves and shit. We can see in the dark, and you're like, oh.
I was so proud of myself. Yeah, you guys, that's right. I chose to be a dwarf in D&D.
Oh my god, you guys, it's such a pain in the ass.
Don't judge me.
Joel's no, it's not the dwarf. I don't have the problem with the dwarf shit. He's the only one in the group that decided to do what are you, neutral good or something?
Lawful neutral.
Yeah, he's a lawful character, you guys.
Oh, fuck me, I guess.
The other day we were gonna steal a boat, and he was like, "I'm gonna leave some of our health potion for them," and I was like, "You will not."
It was mine. I could have left it for him.
I was like, "I'll just steal it after you leave it. Fine."
Man, I see there's some obvious
Chaotic neutral, dog.
there's some obvious racism towards dwarves going on.
No,
here,
it's towards your weird moral lawful code.
Oh, sure, yeah. That's what it is.
We're gonna throw this up as a Patreon bit where I just bitch at Joel about his Pathfinder character.
All right. So during the War of the Dwarves and Orcs, the dwarves successfully assailed and sacked every orc hold they could find from Mount Gundabad in the north to the Gladden in the south.
Yeah, this is essentially that point when you've conquered enough of the side missions in Skyrim where you have nothing else to do but to just go through every cave and clear them all.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what they did.
Yeah, that's what the dwarves did.
So the war came to a climax in 2799 when the final battle was fought in the Demerald Dale below the east gate of Moria. And this is called the Battle of Azanulbazar, also called the Battle of Nanduhirion.
That'd be the Elvish word for it?
Yes. Yeah, that's the Sindarin word for it.
And this is a notoriously bloody battle. The first attack by the dwarves was thrown back with heavy losses, and Thrain was driven into thick woods nearby.
Yeah, there Thrain's son, Frerin, died, and so did Thrain's kinsman, Fundin, who is Balin's father, and many other dwarves besides.
And both Thrain and his son Thorin were wounded.
Yeah, and just so everyone's clear, this is the Thrain that you think it is, and this is Thorin Oakenshield that we're talking about.
Right, but we don't call him Oakenshield until
after this, actually.
Just a second here, yeah. I was like, until just a second here.
So elsewhere, the battle is raging on back and forth until at last dwarven reinforcements arrive from the Iron Hills.
And these guys are led by Nain, who is son of Gror, the Lord of the Iron Hills.
Yeah, because Iron Hills doesn't have kings.
And these dwarves were rested and fresh to the field, raring and ready to go. Fully armed and filthy. Yeah, they were also, dwarven warriors, so they wore dwarven mail. They said they were mailed soldiers. Oh, yeah.
And dwarven mail is known to be the best mail that exists.
Yeah, armor, in general, dwarves are the best at that shit.
Mm-hmm. That's why they're the ones that made, the Mithril mail shirt.
Mm-hmm.
They're just the best with that kind of stuff. And so, anyway, these reinforcements come in, and the dwarves drive the orcs all the way back to the eastern gate of Moria the whole time, crying, Azog, because they are just infuriated.
Yeah, and at the gate, Nain yelled inside, quote, Azog, if you are in, come out, or is the play in the valley too rough? Ooh, pussy, get out of here.
Yeah, this reminds me of when fucking Fingolfin tries to fight Morgoth. Yeah.
Come on out.
So Azog comes. Azog appears, but he also appears with his special guard of fighters. And Azog himself and his guards are all described as, quote, great orcs with huge ironclad heads, and yet they are very agile and strong. So these guys are motherfuckers.
Yeah, dude, these aren't your run-of-the-mill type orcs.
So in this ensuing fight, Azog kills Nain and then picks up Nain's head and gives a great yell of triumph.
And it is said that the cry died in his throat as he saw the dwarves become enraged and began slaughtering Azog's host. I could just imagine that, ha 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 ha, and then you turn around and just see like, Baruch Kazad, Kazad Amoy, and it's like,
Baruch
oh,
Kazad,
shit.
Baruch Kazad.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some of the descriptions of this fight in the appendix were really cool. I couldn't include all the excerpts I wanted to. But
Yeah, this part in the appendix is dope. I love
at this part it says that like he looked and basically they were just killing everybody.
Yeah.
And his orcs that were left were either scattering or dying. Like there was no in between. They were either running for their lives or dying viciously.
As Azog turned to run back to the gate, a dwarf with a red axe leapt up the stairs and killed Azog, cutting off his head. And who the fuck was that, Joel?
It was Dane to Ironfoot of the Iron Hills.
And this is an impressive feat for Dane, considering he was only 32 fucking years old at the time.
That is really young for a dwarf.
Yeah, that would be like, fucking a 16-year-old kid just comes up and cuts the leader of his head off.
Yeah, it was a hell of a feat, and it was renowned. And also during this part of the battle is also when Thorin gets his surname Oakenshield.
Right, because that when they're pushed back into the woods, he just grabs a piece of wood, right, and uses it as a shield. Isn't that why they call him that?
Yeah, he uses a piece of wood as a shield when he's fighting. That's what he hits. So that part in the movie is legit. That is how he gets the name Oakenshield.
I kind of honestly thought it was pretty cool that he still used that as a shield like, in the movie.
Yeah.
Like, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, when they brought it back to that, I thought that was a fun tie around. That was cool.
I was okay with it.
So, after the death of Azog the Defiler, the dwarves finally gained victory and ended the War of the Dwarves and Orcs.
So endeth the War of the Dwarves and Orcs.
Yeah, so ultimately, this battle of Azanelbazar ended the war, and this war was actually pretty fucking nuts. So the numbers are this. So about 10,000 orcs were killed in that battle alone in the Dimril Dale. And at least that many were killed throughout the previous 6 years of war. We have no fucking clue exactly how many orcs they cleared out of the mountains.
Yeah.
But
as a result of such losses, the orcs of the Misty Mountains virtually disappeared as a threat to Eriador and the Wilderland.
Yeah, they really cleaned house.
Yeah, man. They really got them out of there.
Yeah, and so that really wrapped everything up with the orcs. But fun fact, after all of that, you might be thinking about, they finally got there. They finally got Moria back. Well, no. The dwarves did not ultimately retake Moria after this.
Yeah, after the battle, Thrain wanted to reclaim the city, but the other dwarves who were not of Durin's folk, they refused.
Yeah, they basically said the city was not of their father's house. They said that they honored Thror's memory by fighting in the war, but they thought that was enough. They were like, we don't have to go and retake this.
Well, I mean, it's gonna be years. Khazad-dûm is huge,
right? Because you got to clear out all the orcs that are in there. Plus, you're gonna have to deal with the Balrog. So they just finished this war, and they're like, nah, man, sorry.
Which Dane kind of warned about. He was like, yo, we also got that nameless fear that's lurking in there. Whatever.
This is also where Dane gives his he gives a little prophecy about how he saw a vision through the gate of the Balrog still there, and he gives a warning to Thrain saying, hey, we don't want to go in there.
Yeah,
Balrog's still there. But so that's most of everything we've got on Azanelbazar, and we'll end this subject off with an excerpt here as well.
At last, all the orcs that fled before them were gathered in Moria, and the dwarf host in pursuit came to Anzanulzabar. When the dwarves saw the gate of their ancient mansions upon the hillside, they sent up a great shout like thunder in the valley. But a great host of foes was arrayed on the slopes above them, and out of the gates poured a multitude of orcs that had been held back by Azog for the last need. At first fortune was against the dwarves, for it was a dark day of winter without the sun, and the orcs did not waver, and they outnumbered their enemies, and had the higher ground. So began the battle of Anzanulzabar, or Nanduhirion in the Elvish tongue, at the memory of which the orcs still shudder and the dwarves weep. When at last the battle was won, the dwarves that were left gathered in Anzanulzabar. They took the head of Azog and thrust into its mouth the purse of small money, and they set it on a stake. But no feast nor song was there that night, for their dead were beyond the count of grief. Barely half of their number, it is said, could still stand or had hope of healing.
That's rough. That's quite a toll.
Yeah. So that's some of the lesser known dwarf battles, and there are more.
Yeah, I'm sure there are more. Maybe we'll touch on some in the future. But now let's dive into some of the lesser known Dunedain battles.
Let's get in some Dunedanery.
Dunedanery. So the first battle we wanted to talk about in regards to the Dunedain is the Kinstrife, which isn't so much of a battle as it is just an all-out civil war.
A series of Civil War-type conflicts.
Mm-hmm. So the Kinstrife was ultimately a disastrous civil war in Gondor from the years 1432 to 1447.
The king of Gondor at this time was King Valakar. But King Valakar's wife and son were Gondorian. They were not Gondorian, excuse me. They came from the Northmen of Rovanion.
Yeah, so they weren't...
Not Dunedain.
Not Dunedain. So after Valakar died, his son Eldakar took the throne, and this caused quite a bit of outrage. Yeah, several people who just weren't okay in Gondor with having... They talked about it as like lesser blood.
Yeah, this is like
in their rulers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so several members of the House of Anarion actually came forward to try to claim the crown, and a full-scale civil war broke out in 1432.
It sure did, and it was called the Kinstrife, and it lasted 15 friggin' years. The rebel with the largest following was Castamir the Usurper, the captain of ships, who attacked and captured Osgiliath, who was the capital at that time, by river. Because he was hanging out down in like Umbar or something, wasn't he?
Right, yeah. And luckily, Eldakar managed to escape Osgiliath to his homeland in Rovanion, so he was not killed. But Osgiliath was set on fire, and his elder son was captured and executed.
Ugh.
Yeah, things got pretty bloody.
Castamir, he proved to be a pretty shitty ruler, and he earned the hatred of the inner provinces.
Yeah, pretty quickly. And so meanwhile, back in Rovanion, Eldakar is still there, and he acquired actually a great following of men up there, and after several years, he returned with his Northmen allies and attacked Castamir and killed him and defeated his army.
Yeah, and Castamir's sons, they hightailed it back to Umbar, and they declared their own independence.
Yeah, and this is when Umbar really becomes that haven of Black Numenorians that we know about in the Third Age and Lord of the Rings and such. And so when they flee down to Umbar, that's more or less the end of the Kinstrife, the war. But in the year 1634, descendants of Castamir, the usurper, organize a devastating raid on the haven of Peligir and kill the king of the time, King Menardil, who was visiting.
Oh no, Menardil.
Right, yeah. So even though the Kinstrife has been over for almost 200 years, the
repercussions of it,
still going on,
I don't know if I don't know. I just thought of this. Wasn't when Thorongil killed the leader of Umbar? Do you remember that when he ran with when Aragorn was Thorongil?
Yeah.
Is that one of the descendants of Castamir?
I would assume so.
Yeah. I think they mentioned it's one of the descendants of Castamir.
Okay.
Which is weird because that would be like a relative of his.
Yeah, it would. Well, yeah it'd be one of the usurpers from the usurper family. Yeah, so we'll end off the subject of the kinslaying here with a excerpt. The high men of Gondor already looked askance at the Northmen among them, and it was a thing unheard of before that their heir of the crown, or any son of the king, should wed one of lesser and alien race. There was already rebellion in the southern provinces when King Valakar grew old. His queen had been a fair and noble lady, but short-lived according to the fate of lesser men, and the Dunedain feared that her descendants would prove the same and fall from their majesty of the kings of men. Also, they were unwilling to accept as lord her son, who was named one of his mother's people. Therefore, when Eldakar succeeded his father, there was a war in Gondor. But Eldakar did not prove easy to thrust from his heritage. To the lineage of Gondor he added the fearless spirit of the Northmen. When the Confederates led by descendants of the kings rose against him, he opposed them to the end of his strength.
Just a little tidbit on the Kinstrife here. So people kind of give Tolkien a little bit of shit for him putting so much emphasis on bloodlines and purity and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of Tolkien's way of this story. It's kind of like him saying, like, this is the kind of shit that happens when you put too much stake in that kind of stuff.
Right, yeah.
And it ultimately weakens your society when you do that.
Right, yeah.
Because, like, this is the kind of shit that happens.
Yeah, his story about, the shit that can come from people trying to stick so closely to high races and bloodlines
Right.
and things.
And it straight up
It's a
says that the blood of the men of the Northmen strengthened Gondor.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, don't be racist, guys.
Yeah, don't be racist. A lot of people say, because Tolkien does, he does lay a lot of weight on the bloodline stuff. But this story, in my opinion, is him saying, like, yo, let's not get too obsessed with that kind of stuff. So some more Dunedain stuff. Let's get into some Dunedain stuff.
Yeah, what's the next battle we got coming up here?
We got the Battle of Caer Andros. And Caer Andros is a large island in the Anduin River, 40 miles north of Osgiliath. And it got its name, which means the ship of the long foam, because it resembled a ship.
Yeah, apparently the way the river breaks on the northern edge of the island looks just like a ship sailing through the sea.
We were talking about Raspberry Island is kind of like that.
Yeah.
Looks like a ship.
It's pretty cool.
Raspberry Island's a island of the Mississippi River in the middle of downtown St. Paul.
Mighty Mississippi. Yeah, so Caer Andros was very important to Gondor during the war with Mordor in order to prevent the enemy from crossing the river and entering into Enorion. That was basically the region just north of Gondor. So it was basically a good way to keep them from crossing the river and attacking them from the north.
Right, yeah. Because Enorion's that inner province of Gondor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. After the Battle of Pelennor Fields ended on March 15th, TA 3019, about 6,000 of Sauron's orcs and men retreated to the island and held it for days.
Yeah, on March 23rd, during Aragorn's march on the Black Gates, he sent 1,000 scared young men from Rohan and Lossarnach from his main host to go retake the island of Caer Andros.
Yeah, because this is when they're marching to their inevitable doom.
Right.
They get to that crossroads and some of them, they kind of it's not so much them pussing out either. It's more like the other soldiers kind of look at them and they're like, these are just children. Why... I don't blame them for not wanting to go die.
Right, because right before this is when they have, what is it called, the last debate?
Yeah, where they decide that they're all going to march to their deaths.
Where they basically decide on a suicide mission. So, everyone's going into this thinking it's a suicide mission. Yeah, so these men were terrified of the idea of this suicide mission, but King Aragorn, well, he's not king yet, but Aragorn gave them leave to instead go retake the island. And not much is known about the battle of retaking the island, but it is known that it was a success. Because as Frodo observes as he returns from his quest, he observes that the island's docks are filled with Gondorian ships again. So
right.
We know it was a success, but there isn't a lot of detail on the battle.
Yeah. They're actually real ships there instead of floating pieces of shit that
shitty dinghies,
make,
oily
I imagine
and
they probably make boats out of their own poop. That's
you think so? Dry it?
Why not? Yeah, like Pykrete, but made of poop.
Interesting.
Poopcrete.
Poopcrete. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's something they could mold with their hands. I was wondering where they'd get the wood, because there isn't really any wood in Mordor for ships, so...
No, that much grows there. They just use poop.
They just use poop.
They, bake it in the fucking volcano. They make, orc poop pottery. That'd be super funny that if, orcs are orcs are terrible, but they make amazing pottery out of their own shit, and I don't know...
It's super durable.
It's super durable, and it just makes everything taste better.
It turns out it's actually on par with mithril.
Yeah, it's some dwarf make shit.
So we'll end off the subject of the Battle of Caer Andros with a nice excerpt about it.
Aragorn looked at them, and there was pity in his eyes rather than wrath. For these were young men from Rohan, from Westfold, far away, or husbandmen from Lossarnach. And to them Mordor had been from childhood a name of evil and yet unreal, a legend that had no part in their simple life. And now they walked like men in a hideous dream made true, and they understood not this war, nor why fate should lead them to such a pass. Go, said Aragorn, but keep what honor you may and do not run. And there is a task to which you may attempt, and so be not wholly shamed. Take your way southwest till you come to Caer Andros. And if that is still held by enemies, as I think, then retake it, if you can, and hold it to the last in defense of Gondor and Rohan. Then some, being shamed by his mercy, overcame their fear and went on, and the others took new hope, hearing of a manful deed with their measure that they could turn to, and they departed. All right, our next battle, also Dunedain.
Yeah, this one's fun because this gets into the Northern Kingdom, which I feel like is a a lesser known subject. And we're talking about the Battle of Fornost.
Yeah. And this is during really the tail end of the decline of the North Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when Arnor had been split by civil war. I guess you could say civil war. It was split into 3 smaller kingdoms, Cardolan, Rhudaur, and Arthedain. The capital city of Arthedain was Fornost. And Arthedain basically is true Arnor. That is, because what happened, in a nutshell, guys, what happened was a king's 3 sons fought over the realm of Arnor when he died, and their oldest son claimed the whole kingdom, but only ultimately was able to control Arthedain. So the real line of kings is through that oldest one.
Gotcha.
The Arthedain.
So during the wars with Angmar, which began in 1409, the kingdom of Arthedain was basically the last remnant of the kingdom of Gondor. Like everything else had more or less fallen to Angmar.
Yeah, the Great Plague really helped with that.
Oh yeah, thinned out their numbers.
In 1974, Third Age, the kingdom of Arthedain was destroyed, and the last realm of the northern Dunedain was no more.
Yeah, the armies of Angmar and its allies overran the northern lands, destroying the capital of Fornost. And after the fall of Arthedain, King Arvidwi, the last king of Arnor, he fled north to the ice bay of Forakel, and he did it kind of desperately. His kingdom just fell. And
I think he left his kid Aranorth and Rivendell and left.
Yeah, and it seemed at this time that the Witch King's victory was complete. He had completely destroyed the northern kingdom. Now, down to the south, hearing of this attack, Gondor tried to send aid to the northern kingdom.
And then we get this guy. Yeah, if we ever do an Unsung Heroes battle episode, this guy's going to be in it. This is Prince Aranur. He's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
So Prince Aranur of Gondor leads a host of men down the Anduin, and they sail up to the aid of the Northern Kingdom, not really knowing it has already been completely destroyed, because they're not using the Palantiri at this time.
Right, yeah. Yeah, this time things are falling apart, so they're not using those Palantiri for communication. So they didn't realize that Arvidwi had already dipped out.
He actually took 2 of those with him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He
Nice.
took the Anumina stone and the one from Amatul.
I wonder if those sunk in his ship.
They did. They're at the bottom of the ocean.
Damn, that's crazy.
Yep. But after arriving and seeing that he was too late, Prince Aranor was pissed off.
He was furious.
Furious. And he joined the Elves of Lindon and the remnant of the Northern Dunedain, and they marched east to avenge the loss of Fornost. And they're pissed. Like, when we say they're pissed, like, they're quite wrathful.
Yeah, they had no idea. Like, they were coming to help their sister kingdom, and they get there and they realize
it's already gone.
Everybody's
dead, scattered.
Not only are they losing, but they have already lost, and everyone's dead and gone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's horrible.
And Prince Aranor, he meets up with the Elves of Lindon, led by near Glorfindel.
Glorfindel.
Yeah.
So they march east, and they meet the Witch King's armies, not at Fornost itself, but on the plains just westward towards Lake Evendim.
And aided by Aranor's military skill and a force sent up on Rivendell led by Glorfindel, the armies of the Dunedain and the Elves utterly defeat Angmar's armies.
Oh, and they just clean them up.
Oh, yeah.
And after a long chase, the Witch King flees into the darkness of night and escapes. And at this point, this is when Aranur, he wants to go pursue the Witch King. He wants to run off into the darkness. And
yeah, he's like, let's go after this prick.
Yeah, but Glorfindel, this is when Glorfindel stops him and makes his famous prophecy, where he says, quote, "Not by the hand of man shall he fall," as later proves true during the War of the Ring.
Yeah. Do we all remember what happens to Aranur?
Isn't that when he goes to he goes to Minas Ithil for a challenge?
Yeah,
it never comes out.
Yeah, he's the last childless king of Gondor. Yeah, the last of the line of Anarion. But he's known for his temper, and he doesn't like the Witch King. And he knows that.
The Witch King.
And the Witch King, remember, he sends those messengers making fun of him.
Right.
Yeah. He's like, why don't you come down to Minas Morgul? Have mano a mano.
Come fuck with us. Nope, not a good idea. Yeah, it was. Right after actually the battle was all over and the Witch King fled. It was said that one night during the camp, the Witch King just appeared on a horse and charged Aranur just to try to fucking get him. And Aranur dodges out of the way and he runs off into the night laughing. Like,
Fuck that dude.
yeah, he's all about trolling Aranur, and it ultimately works in the end.
Aranur must have been one of those people that was really funny to make mad. Like, he was just, one of those
Probably
people.
it was probably like when Dom rages at games.
Oh my god, our friend Dom is
Yeah.
one of the funniest mad people of all time.
Our friend Dominic, he's one of our friends we love to play games with, but sometimes he's a bit of a rager.
Dude,
And
Dom's been on the show.
Yeah.
That's right, Dom's been on the show way back in season 1.
Oh, that was a while back, wasn't it?
Yeah, Tolkien video games. But he rages pretty hard.
We love you, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna end the Battle of Fornost here with a nice excerpt. Then Círdan summoned all who would come to him from Lindon or Arnor, and when all was ready, the host crossed the Lune and marched north to challenge the Witch King of Angmar. He was now dwelling, it is said, in Fornost, which he had filled with evil folk, usurping the house and rule of the kings. In his pride he did not await the onset of his enemies in his stronghold, but instead went out to meet them, thinking to sweep them, as others before, into the Lune. But the host of the west came down on him out of the hills of Evendim, and there was great battle on the plain between Nanuil and the North Downs. The forces of Angmar were already giving way and retreating towards Fornost, when the main body of horsemen that had passed round the hills came down from the north and scattered them in a great rout. Then the Witch King, with all that he could gather from wreck, fled northwards, seeking his own land of Angmar. But before he could gain the shelter of Carndum, the cavalry of Gondor overtook him with Aranur riding at their head. At the same time, a force under Glorfindel the Elf Lord came up out of Rivendell. Then so utterly was Angmar defeated that not a man nor an orc of that realm remained west of the mountains.
Yeah, they really took a hammer to that situation.
Cleaned it out.
Yeah, which is funny because then the Dunedain kind of take over at maintaining that peace that they had so utterly laid down.
Yeah, because this is when the Northern Rangers kind of subtly take over keeping up the peace, right?
Right, because Arvidwi, don't quote me on this, dies in 1979.
Okay.
And then Aranarth takes over. I believe Aranarth was hiding in Rivendell.
And he's the first chieftain, right?
He is the first chieftain of the Dunedain, yeah.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is, I guess, when the Northern Dunedain Rangers end up coming about.
Yeah, and the whole Battle of Fornost and Fall of the Northern Kingdom totally sets up the story of the Lord of the Rings. Because the whole book that we know takes place in the Shire, which is in the Old North Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything that we know, Bree, all this shit, like all that's in the North Kingdom. It's a good thing to know.
Yeah, it's a good subject to look over because it is really important in regards to the War of the Rings stuff.
Yeah, and these are all Aragorn's ancestors, some super badass dudes. I really like Arvidwi. Arvidwi, just for those Dunedain heads out there, we talked about he tried to claim the kingship of Gondor during the King Strife.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Didn't get it, but...
Didn't get it. Because his wife was daughter of Andoher, son of the line of Anarion.
Yeah,
which is why Aragorn is also the son of Anarion.
There it is. Boom.
Boom.
Both houses.
Oh, I want to... in a past episode, we said that Aragorn is descended from Anarion through his mother. What I meant was through his Arvidwi's,
his father's mother,
or his 16 generations removed. So Aranarth's mother was from the line of Anarion.
Okay,
so not Gilraen the Fair as you might think.
Okay,
based on what I said, it was a total mistake of mine. I was just listening to it yesterday. That's what I've noticed. So yeah, retract that. Not through Gilraen the Fair, but through Arvidwi.
Dope. All right, so
let's get in some Elder Days shit, dog.
Yeah, so we thought we'd sort of end our Lesser Known Battles episode off with a fun one. This is a first stage battle, and this is actually an elf on dwarf battle, which doesn't happen all that much.
Yeah, some hot dwarf on elf action.
Yeah, this has a lot to do with the bad blood, the disparity between the elves and the dwarves that, is so commonly talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And the battle we're talking about is the Battle of Sarn Athrad.
Let's get back in the way back machine and go to 502, first stage. King Thingol of Doriath has asked the dwarves of Norgrad to remake the Nauglamir and set in it the Silmaril he received from Beren.
Yeah, the dwarven craftsmen from Norgrad performed this task, but they were secretly determined to possess the finished work and carry it off to their home. So when Thingol was ready to place the completed necklace on his neck, the dwarves basically challenged his right to own it. They're like, who are you to own the necklace of King Felagund of Nargothrond?
Yeah.
Like it was
Because they gave him.
Yeah, they gave it to
necklace,
Nargothrond. They gave it to Felagund. They didn't give it to Thingol. So they're like, and then so Thingol tries to put on the necklace, and the dwarves basically refuse. Give it to him, and then Thingol straight up rebukes the dwarves.
And when we say rebukes, we just read this a couple weeks ago in our. I got to read this part out loud in the Silmarillion read along group that we do every week. He rebukes them. He's really rude to them.
He says, what does he say?
He says, "Ye of uncouth race." Remember? Yeah.
Who do you think you are, ye of uncouth race, to claim, this work of the elves and stuff?
Yeah, he gets real mad. I just remember ye of uncouth race. I just remember
like, whoa.
Because I remember reading it and everyone was just like, I could hear everybody reacting and I was like, all right, I got to go hard on this Thingol quote. And I was just like giving it everything I got and everyone was just like, yeah.
It's satisfying to see those who have never read the story before hit some of those.
Yeah, some of those epic moments.
It's great. So at this point, the dwarves, they don't say anything. They just kill the king where he stands. So this is the death of King Thingol.
Yeah.
He's slaughtered in his own house, in his own smithies.
King of Beleriand in general, really.
Right. And so the ensuing conflict basically leads to the sacking of Doriath by the dwarves.
And that's the first sacking of Doriath.
That's the first sacking, yeah. But it was brutal.
Yeah.
And after the sacking of the kingdom of Doriath, the dwarves of Nogrod were returning to Nogrod, heavily laden and slowed by the spoils of their victory. They took all the treasure they could.
Oh, yeah. And they were attempting to cross the river Gellion at Sarn Athrad, which is known as the Ford of Stones. And the dwarves, they climbed up Gellion's banks, in the air filled with the sound of elven horns and the shafts of arrows. Because why? They were assailed by Layla Quendi of Osirion, led by Baron Urkamion. And
accompanied by his son Dior.
Yeah. I didn't know that Dior was there.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, might as well.
But yeah, they go head to head with these motherfuckers because they heard what happened in Doriath and they left Tol Galen to deal with this shit.
Yeah, they came to fuck shit up.
Yeah,
because that's Dior's family. Right?
Oh yeah, that's their family. Yeah, yeah, dude. That's Dior's grandfather, Baron's father-in-law.
Yeah,
pissed.
The king of the Doriath. That's their line. They come from there.
And Baron actually slew the Lord of Nargrod and took from him the Naglamir. And as Joel said so brilliantly earlier, he actually slew him single-handedly.
Pun intended.
Oh God!
You might say he did it single-handedly.
If you don't get that joke, go back to our Baron and Luthien character profile.
Where we talk about how he got his hand cut off.
Yeah, exactly. Urkamion means one-handed.
Yeah, he basically had like a Luke Skywalker moment. Just
Well, it was bitten off by a damn
it wasn't
wolf.
cut off. It was bit off, but either way. So as the Lord of Nogrod was dying, though, he cursed all of the treasure that they had taken from Doriath, and the curse remained on that treasure. So what did they do with it? Baron and the elves took all this cursed dwarven elf treasure, and they decided to dump it in the nearby river of Askar. Afterwards, the river of Askar was renamed Rathlorien, which is Golden Bed. Yeah, so that was a pretty cool battle, elves on dwarves. It's not something that happens too much, and it explains that bad blood between the two races that goes on for so many centuries.
Mm-hmm. And it's got Baron fucking squaring off with a dwarf lord. Yeah,
a one-handed Baron and a dwarf lord, and Baron's son is there, and they're all kicking ass. It's a pretty sweet battle, and so we'll go ahead and end off our section about the Battle of Sarn Athrad with an excerpt about it.
In that time a messenger came to them out of Doriath, telling them what had befallen there. Then Baron arose and left Tol Galen, and summoning to him Dior his son, they went north to the river Askar, and with them many of the green elves of Osirion. Thus it came to pass that when the dwarves of Nargrod, returning from Menegroth with diminished hosts, came again to Sarn Athrad, they were assailed by unseen enemies. For as they climbed up Gellion's banks burdened with the spoils of Doriath, suddenly all the woods were filled with the sound of elven horns, and the shafts sped upon them from every side. There very many of the dwarves were slain on the first onset, but some escaping from the ambush held together and fled eastward toward the mountains, and they climbed the long slopes beneath Mount Dolmed, There came forth the shepherds of the trees, and they drove the dwarves into the shadowy woods of arid Lindon, whence it is said, came never one to their homes. In that battle, by Sarn Athrod, Baron fought his last fight, and himself slew the Lord of Nargod, and wrestled from him the necklace of the dwarves. Just as a little side note there, the Ents get involved.
Yeah, that was actually something that I hadn't remembered previously until I did this.
I didn't remember that until halfway through reading that quote.
And you're like, oh shit. Yeah, the dwarves. Okay, yeah. So it was an elf on dwarf, and it included the Ents. Like, this is a crazy fucking battle.
Yeah.
Like, the dwarves that made it out of the battle tried to run up the slopes, and then the Ents came out and drove them into the trees, like that deleted scene in the Two Towers, so all the orcs run into the trees.
Yeah, this is like
gone,
the end of the first stage when everything is wild as fuck.
Right.
Like,
and
all this wild shit is going
as
on.
we heard after the battle of the Hornburg, the trees took all the bodies.
Yeah, it says none of these dwarves ever made it home.
Yeah, I imagine these trees probably took all the... We know they take bodies, so
Yeah.
that's just one more terrifying detail.
What do they do with them?
I imagine it's got to be like a fertilizer type thing, right? Like, I mean, after all those... I mean, they're going to rot and die, so trees need fertilizer, right? I mean,
yeah. Just
it's terrifying, though.
Cut to a bunch of Ents just smoking weed out of a dwarf skull. Just
Well, that's about all we've got for you guys today in our lesser-known battles.
This was hella fun. I want to do more and more of these.
Yeah, these were great. Let us know what you guys thought. Do you have any suggestions? You thought we gave each of these battles justice? Hit us up on social media.
Yeah, hit us up about your favorite lesser-known battle, because, if we want to do more of these in the future, it'll be nice to know. Because there's so many battles.
Oh, yeah, like we started off saying, so many.
You cut this list down from, 15 or something?
From 15 down to 8.
Yeah.
8 or 9.
Yeah.
But, so that's all we've got for you today, guys. Thanks for listening to KOT Podcast.
Yeah, make sure you follow us on social media, at KOT Podcast on Twitter. If you want to follow me, I am at Danny J, that's Jay, KOT, on Twitter as well.
And be sure to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/official Keep On Tolkien. And while you're there, be sure to join the KOT Talk group.
Yeah, and there you can ask questions and discuss with other listeners. So we post funny Lord of the Rings jokes and stuff.
Yeah, we're talking there.
Yeah, start debates.
We've got a book club that's going on in there right now.
Yes, yeah. We just we just finished the Quenta Silmarillion in our book club.
Yeah, come tune in with us. If pictures are more your thing, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Keep On Tolkien Podcast. And be sure to subscribe on SoundCloud or iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. That will be at that website /Keep On Tolkien. And stay up to date on our new episodes.
Yeah, and give us a rate and leave a nice review if you like. If you don't like us, that's cool.
It's all right.
To each his own. Just, keep it to yourself. Yes, also thank you so much to our Patreon patrons.
Yeah, your support really helps us so much.
So what Patreon is it's a subscription service that helps fund us. And if you want to check that out, it's www.patreon.com/KOT podcast. And KOT podcast is still a 100% DIY operation. It still comes out of our pockets, and donations help so much.
If you would like to donate to the Patreon, it also gets you some great exclusive content. And that exclusive content is almost always not safe for work. We like to have some fun with the Patreon content.
Yeah, and we're working on making more and more of that. So if I apologize that we've been a little bit derelict on it, but we're gonna we're trying to get in the habit of making stuff. So we're kind of going through a renaissance of our Patreon right now. So bear with us. But anyway, thank you so much for donating if you have already.
Yeah.
And if not, give us a subscribe for a little bit. You can also set your own donation and cancel whenever. So, things happen. If you can't afford it anymore, you can't afford it anymore.
But that's about all we've got for you today, guys.
I am Danny J.
And I am Joel N. And as always, keep on Tolkien.
Oh, right into the...